It was a warm spring evening in Maple Ridge, Illinois. Mark Riley, 47 years old, was hosting his annual backyard barbecue. Laughter echoed from the patio, kids ran in the grass, and classic rock hummed from a speaker tucked under the porch light. He just told a joke, some goofy, dad-level pun about squirrels and stock markets. The punchline hit, and the laughter followed. Mark laughed the hardest. He clutched his stomach, threw his head back, and let out one of those deep, belly laughs that made everyone else laugh just because it was so infectious. And then something changed. Midliff Mark's eyes fluttered. His smile froze, faltered, and then, like a light switch, he slumped over. Silence fell. Time fractured. Plates clattered, someone screamed. Mary, his wife, bolted toward him. Mark was breathing. Barely. An ambulance arrived in 11 minutes. But 6 hours later, at 2:07 a.m., Mark Riley was gone. Cardiac arrest. Triggered by a laugh. Mark Riley didn't smoke. Didn't drink more than a weekend beer. He ran 3 times a week, ate kale without complaint, and did yearly checkups like clockwork. No warning signs, dear doctor told Mary, avoiding her eyes. None, she whispered. Heart arrhythmia. Sudden. Laughter was the trigger. The underlying cause, we suspect a genetic condition. But he laughed all the time. I know. That night, Mary curled into Mark's favorite flannel shirt, breathing in his scent, the jokes still echoing in her ears. 2 weeks later, the coroner's report landed in Mary's mailbox. She read it at the kitchen table. Long QT syndrome, a rare, inherited heart rhythm disorder. It affects the heart's electrical system, prolonging the time it takes to recharge between beats. Triggers like sudden excitement, exercise, or even laughter can send the heart into chaos. Mark never knew. Neither did his parents, or his siblings. He had lived 47 years with a time bomb inside him. Mary's world became quieter, though not calmer. People didn't know what to say. Some avoided her. Others dropped off casseroles, awkward sympathy wrapped in aluminum foil. Her teenage son, David, stopped telling jokes. Her younger boy, Sam, wouldn't laugh at cartoons anymore. Laughter had become the enemy. But grief, Mary realized, isn't just sadness. It's confusion. It's rage. It's a search for meaning in the meaningless. She needed answers. Mary dove into research. Long QT syndrome. Genetic arrhythmias. Laughter-induced cardiac arrest. She found a few cases, an Australian boy who died at school during a prank. A woman in Canada who collapsed at a comedy club. Not many, but enough to know Mark wasn't the first. And unless something changed, he wouldn't be the last. Doctors recommended the boys be tested. David had it. Sam didn't. David, her bright, funny, soccer-playing 15-year-old, had inherited the same silent killer. But now they knew. Now he could be monitored, treated, protected. The diagnosis hit harder than any joke. But it also gave Mary a mission. 1 year later, on the anniversary of Mark's death, Mary hosted a community event in the town square. They called it Mark's Laughin'. Free heart screenings. Cardiologists gave talks. There was even a comedy show, clean jokes only, and no one laughed too hard without being checked by a nurse. Over 400 people came. 89 got screened. 3 had abnormalities they never knew about. One of them was a 23-year-old named Tyler, who later wrote Mary, "Your husband saved my life." Mary couldn't forget the joke. Squirrels trading nuts on the stock market, Mark had said. Turns out they were hedging their bets. It was dumb. Classic dad humor. But it haunted her. How could something so silly, so innocent, be the spark that ended everything? And then she realized it wasn't the joke. It was the silence before. The silence of no diagnosis. Mary began speaking out. Local schools invited her to talk to health classes. She joined a National Arrhythmia Foundation. She raised money for free ECG screenings in underserved communities. She spoke on podcasts, in hospital conference rooms, even on a national morning show. Her message was clear: laughter is not the enemy. Ignorance is. On the second anniversary of Mark's death, David, now 17, stood before 600 people at the annual laugh-in. He clutched the mic with shaking hands. "My dad died laughing. Not because life was funny, but because no one knew what was inside his heart. Now we do. I do. And because of that, I get to live." The crowd stood in silence. Then applause. Then laughter, as David told his dad's squirrel joke. And this time, it didn't hurt. 2 days after the first Mark's Laugh-In event, Mary sat quietly in her living room, scrolling through her phone. The community turnout had been more than she ever imagined. Over 400 people showed up, and dozens had gotten screened. Yet what she saw now was beyond her wildest hopes. A video of her son David's speech had been uploaded by a local attendee. The clip showed David standing on the town square stage, his voice steady but filled with raw emotion as he told the story of his father's sudden death and the diagnosis that saved his own life. The words, "Laughter shouldn't be a death sentence," were emblazoned across the screen in bold letters. Mary felt her throat tighten as she watched. Comments poured in, thousands of them. People shared their own experiences with silent heart conditions, many revealing they had lost loved ones to unexpected cardiac arrests. Others thanked Mary and David for raising awareness and saving lives. One comment caught her eye. "My sister was just diagnosed after watching this video. Thank you for sharing your story." Mary wiped away a tear. Mark's story was no longer just a family tragedy, it was becoming a lifeline for others. The video crossed state lines, landing on the feeds of national health organizations, influencers, and even major news outlets. Suddenly, Mark's laugh, the last thing anyone expected, had started a conversation that could change lives. Mary's phone buzzed unexpectedly one afternoon, breaking the quiet routine she'd settled into over the past year. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize. When she answered, a calm voice came through, Dr. Lin, the emergency room physician who had treated Mark the night he collapsed. "Mrs. Riley, this is Dr. Lin. I hope I'm not disturbing you." Mary swallowed hard. "No, it's okay. How can I help you? I've been following the story, the awareness work you and your family have been doing. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for what happened to Mark, and for what we missed." Mary's heart clenched. "I don't understand. You were the doctor that night." "Yes. And we did everything by protocol. But since then, we've reviewed Mark's case in detail. It's clear now that the standard screening missed his long QT syndrome, a condition that's tricky to detect without specific tests." Mary remembered that night. The flashing lights, the cold urgency, the promise of hope that slipped away in hours. "I've helped update our emergency protocols," Dr. Lin continued. "Now, anyone presenting with syncope or unexplained fainting will get an ECG screening focused on these silent genetic heart conditions. Your courage pushed us to do better." Tears welled up in Mary's eyes. "Thank you for telling me. I just wanted you to know, Mary, that your voice is saving lives. Mark's story is changing how we care for patients everywhere." Mary hung up feeling a bittersweet mix of sadness and hope. Mark was gone, but his story was reshaping medicine, one heartbeat at a time. A week after Dr. Lin's call, Mary received an email from a woman named Angela, living in Arizona. Her message was heartfelt and urgent. Her 14-year-old daughter, Emma, had fainted after laughing uncontrollably at a comedy show with friends. Terrified, Angela rushed her to the emergency room, but doctors couldn't explain why the healthy teenager had collapsed. The symptoms were eerily similar to Mark's. Inspired by Mary and David's story, Angela demanded a thorough cardiac evaluation, including an ECG specifically looking for long QT syndrome. The tests confirmed their fears. Emma carried the same dangerous gene. The news hit Mary like a bolt of lightning. But amidst the fear was a profound sense of relief. Emma was alive, and with proper treatment, she had a fighting chance. Mary replied immediately, "Angela, thank you for sharing Emma's story. It means so much to know Mark's journey is helping others. Please let Emma know she is not alone, and we are here for her." Months later, Angela sent a photo of Emma smiling, wearing a bright bracelet that read, "Mark's Heartbeat." The bracelet was part of the awareness campaign Mary and David had launched. Emma's laughter was now a symbol of hope and survival, proof that sometimes even the darkest stories can light the way. Mary hadn't expected the mail to become her lifeline. At first, it was just 1 or 2 handwritten notes. Then dozens. Then entire boxes from the post office filled with envelopes from across the country. Texas, Ohio, Florida, even Alaska. People poured their hearts onto paper. Grieving mothers, scared teenagers, paramedics, and even retired cardiologists. They wrote about sudden collapses, unexplained losses, and close calls. They thanked Mary for speaking when others stayed silent. One woman from Vermont shared that her brother had died at 33, right after laughing at a wedding speech. For years, the cause was unknown. After seeing David's viral video, the family ordered genetic tests. Long Cutie had been hiding in their bloodline all along. Another letter came from a 78-year-old man who wrote, "I've outlived 3 of my siblings. I always thought it was fate or bad luck. After reading about Mark, I got tested. I have the same syndrome. Now I'm on medication, and for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm not waiting to drop dead without warning. Thank you." Mary spent her mornings reading the letters, her afternoons replying. Some days she smiled through tears. Other days, she clutched the pages to her chest and sobbed. Mark was gone. But in every story, every envelope, every trembling signature, he was still changing lives. It was a warm spring morning when David sat alone in his father's old workshop, the small converted garage where Mark used to tinker with wood, fix neighbors' lawnmowers, and blast classic rock on an ancient stereo. Dust still clung to the workbench. A half-finished birdhouse sat untouched, just where Mark had left it. David ran his fingers along the worn handle of a chisel, remembering how his dad once joked that even tools had personalities. "This one's got an attitude," he'd say, holding up a crooked wrench. David smiled faintly. The laugh that had once made him cringe as a teenager now felt like a sacred sound he'd give anything to hear again. He pressed play on the stereo. The garage filled with the raspy voice of Tom Petty, one of Mark's favorites. And in that moment, as sunlight streamed through the cracked window and the smell of sawdust lingered in the air, David could almost hear his dad chuckling beside him. Suddenly, he knew what he had to do. He grabbed his camera and started recording. "Hey everyone, I'm David Riley, and this is where I still feel my dad." The video was raw, unedited, and painfully honest. He walked through the shop, showed the birdhouse, told a story about Mark getting glue in his hair and laughing like it was the best mistake ever made. "I used to think my dad died from laughter, but I've come to realize he lived by it too. His laugh lives on in every person we've helped." By the next morning, the video had over 2 million views. And across the country, people listened to Mark's laugh echo, not as a tragedy, but as a legacy. The email came from the American Heart Alliance, and Mary read it 3 times to believe it. They were inviting her, a retired art teacher and grieving wife, to speak at their National Cardiac Health Conference in Chicago. The theme, Invisible Risks, Real Lives. David was already packing his bag before Mary said yes. "Mom," he grinned, "we've got stories to tell and doctors to shake up." 3 weeks later, mother and son walked nervously into the towering downtown hotel. The hallways buzzed with world-renowned cardiologists, researchers, and healthcare CEOs. Mary clutched her note cards, heart pounding like it hadn't in months. On stage, the screen behind them read, "He laughed at a joke and died 6 hours later. What one family taught us about genetic arrhythmias." Mary began slowly, her voice wavering. "My husband Mark didn't look like a heart condition. He looked like a dad who made terrible puns and grilled everything in sight. He looked like someone who'd live forever. But sometimes, danger hides in a laugh." She told their story, not just of loss, but of resilience. David followed, breaking down how their viral video led to over 1,800 people being screened and 46 lives potentially saved. By the time they finished, the room was silent. Then, Thunderous applause. After the session, a cardiologist approached them. "Your story just changed how I look at asymptomatic patients. I've already messaged my team to add new screening questions to our intake forms." Mary left the conference with something she hadn't felt in a long time: peace. Mark's seat at the table was empty. But his story was now part of something bigger than she ever imagined. It started as a quiet tribute, just one bracelet, handmade by Mary. She'd sat at the kitchen table with a few beads, unsure what she was doing, only that she needed to do something. The bracelet was simple: black, white, and red, Mark's favorite colors, with 3 tiny silver letters threaded in the center, LQ. David posted a photo of it online with the caption, "One laugh took our dad. This bracelet might save someone else's." The post exploded. Within days, people from all over the US messaged them, asking how they could get one. Some wanted to remember someone they'd lost. Others were survivors of long QT syndrome themselves. A few just wanted to spread awareness. They called it Mark's Heartbeat. With the help of a local nonprofit, Mary and David launched a website. For every bracelet sold, $1 went toward funding ECG screenings for underserved schools and free genetic testing for families who couldn't afford it. Photos poured in from across the country. A firefighter in Oregon wearing the bracelet under his uniform. A 12-year-old girl in Ohio, newly diagnosed, flashing a peace sign with hers. A young couple at Disneyland, holding hands, both wrists showing matching bands. Even a cardiology intern at Johns Hopkins, who wore hers every day during rounds. Each bracelet became more than jewelry. It was a badge, a question, a conversation starter. And every time someone asked, "What does LQT mean?" Mark's story was told again. Mary had once feared the world would forget his laugh. But now, it was traveling wrist to wrist, heart to heart, further than she ever dreamed. The call came on a rainy Thursday morning. Mary had just finished replying to a handwritten letter from a teenager in Montana when her cell phone rang. The number was from Washington, D.C., official-looking, unfamiliar. She hesitated, then answered. "Mrs. Riley? This is Senator Elaine Porter's office. The senator has been following your story and would like to speak with you personally. Would you have a moment?" Mary sat upright. Senator Porter was known nationally for healthcare reform and for never wasting time. A moment later, the senator herself came on the line. Her voice was warm but direct. "Mary, your husband's story has become a turning point in how we talk about undiagnosed genetic conditions in this country. I've read the reports. I've seen the impact. We want to do something with it." Senator Porter proposed a bipartisan bill, the Hidden Heart Act, aimed at funding mandatory ECG screenings in high schools, especially in rural and low-income communities. It would also support genetic counseling access for families affected by inherited arrhythmias, families like the Riles. "We need a face for this legislation," the senator said. "A voice. Would you come to Washington and speak before the Health Committee?" Mary didn't hesitate. "I lost Mark. But if his story can help even one more family catch this in time, I will stand on every stage you give me." Weeks later, she stood in front of Congress, next to a framed photo of Mark in his flannel shirt and crooked smile. Her voice didn't waver. She spoke for him, for Emma, for the firefighter, for the bracelets, for every laugh that should never end in silence. The Capitol was buzzing. Cameras flashed. Reporters lined the hallways. But Mary barely noticed them. She sat in the Senate gallery with David beside her, his hand clasping hers tightly. On Mary's wrist, the original Mark's Heartbeat bracelet, faded now, but still strong. Below, on the Senate floor, the roll call began. The Hidden Heart Act, S. 1127. A bill to expand cardiac screening and genetic testing for early detection of inherited arrhythmias. One by one, the votes were cast. Aye. 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 Nay. Aye. Aye. Mary gripped the wooden armrest. Her heart pounded. It was like waiting for a doctor to walk out of a hospital room. Then the final vote came. The bill is passed. Applause erupted in the chamber. But Mary didn't cry. She smiled. Slowly, quietly. Mark wasn't in the room, but he was in the reason it existed. The senator came over and embraced her. You didn't just honor Mark. You saved lives. Generations of them. Later that evening, David and Mary stood at the Lincoln Memorial, the marble bathed in golden light. Tourists snapped photos. A child laughed in the distance. A pure, unburdened laugh. Mary turned to David. Your father would have loved this moment. David looked at her and replied, No, Mo. He made this moment.